Have you ever felt like the whole world forgot you exist? Like your presence was invisible? Even to the ones who once said they loved you. Liam felt like that almost every day. At 34, he walked among tall buildings and rushed streets in a city that didn't even recognize him, like he was just another faded face in the crowd. He lived alone in a small apartment on the 8th floor of an old building, where the silence was so constant he could already tell which neighbor was coming just by the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Life, once full of promises and plans, now felt like a loop of empty days. That morning he was on the subway like always. Cold lights flickered overhead, and the train car was full of people, of noise, of hurry. But Liam seemed distant from it all. Leaning against the window, he stared at his own reflection, trying to figure out exactly when he'd become a stranger to himself. Around him, muffled laughter, phone notifications, low conversations. Inside him, deafening silence. The days before had been filled with subtle but constant rejection. First came the sudden announcement that his position would be terminated for strategic reasons. No real explanation, no support. Then, a longtime friend who just stopped replying to his messages. Disappeared like Liam had never mattered. And finally, his parents. Still alive, still around, but so emotionally distant that phone calls now lasted under 2 minutes. Always ending with, "We're busy, son, talk later." But later never came. Liam tried to stay strong. He picked up his Bible, knelt on the cold living room floor, and began to pray. But it felt like talking to the ceiling. The words no longer came with faith. Just exhaustion. And slowly, he started to think maybe even God had stopped listening. That feeling of being rejected by everyone and everything crept into the corners of his soul like dust. It wasn't the pain of one specific moment. It was the weight of silence. Collection of absences. A life being pushed further to the margins, day by day. He wasn't thinking of giving up on life, just of trying. Of applying for another job. Of messaging someone. Of hoping for a response. He no longer saw himself as someone worth noticing. Rejection had stopped being an event. It had become his identity. In his own eyes, he was the one never chosen, the one always forgotten, the one who just wasn't enough. That night, after another monotonous day, he turned off the lights and laid on his side, too drained to even think. But it was exactly when he felt like no one was left that something began to shift. The next morning, Liam woke up to the persistent buzz of a phone notification. He didn't have many contacts, and rarely got unexpected messages. Eyes still heavy, he unlocked the screen and saw an email. No sender, no subject. Just one sentence in the body. "You're still seen." That was it. No signature, no ads, no link. Just that. His first instinct was to think it was spam and delete it. But those words got stuck in his mind like a strange melody you try to forget, but it keeps playing inside you. Hours later, as he left his building to buy groceries, he passed by an elderly man trying to balance 2 big paper bags. A rip on the side caused several pieces of fruit to roll across the sidewalk. Liam could have kept walking, he probably would have just weeks ago. But without thinking, he knelt and started helping. Together, they picked up the apples, packed everything into a spare bag the old man pulled from his pocket, and reorganized what had spilled. When they finished, the man gently grabbed Liam's arm, looked at him calmly and said, "Good people are still out there. Sometimes they forget. But God never forgets them." Liam thanked him, a little awkwardly, and kept walking. But something inside started to shift. It was like a stone had been lifted off the surface of a dry well. As he walked through the neighborhood, he noticed, for the first time in a long while, the sign of a small church on the corner. The board read, "Even when you feel forgotten, God is still writing your story." Coincidence? He wanted to believe it was. But the words fit too perfectly with everything he'd been feeling lately. On his way back, a familiar old song played on the taxi radio. He recognized the chorus immediately. It was the one his grandfather used to hum on quiet Sunday afternoons when Liam was still a kid and believed the world was good. The memory hit so hard he had to take a deep breath. His grandfather, the one who taught him how to pray simply, sitting on the floor, hands together, eyes closed. God hears even what you can't say, son. That's what he always said. Back home, Liam sat on the couch and looked toward the bookshelf. In the most forgotten corner, covered in dust, was the old Bible his mother gave him before he moved out. He never had the heart to throw it away, but he also never opened it again. Slowly he picked it up. The pages were yellowed, some still marked with old sticky notes. He flipped it open at random and found a verse highlighted in light pink ink. His mom's style. "Though my father and mother forsake me, the Lord will receive me." Liam's heart beat faster. It was like, in the middle of all the silence, God was piecing together forgotten memories to rebuild something inside him. The pain of rejection was still there. Nothing outside had changed. But suddenly, the idea of being completely alone started to lose its grip. What if the problem wasn't the world ignoring him, but the place where he'd been searching for validation? He had been trying to be seen by eyes that would never truly see him, forgetting there was an eternal gaze on him from the very start. That night, Liam prayed differently. He didn't ask for a job, for answers, or for quick relief. He just said, "If you're still there, show me I haven't been forgotten." And this time it didn't feel like silence. In the following weeks, Liam started attending that church, the one with the sign. He didn't talk to anyone. He arrived late during the final worship songs and always sat in the back row near the door, ready to leave unnoticed. But somehow he felt safe there. Not because of the people, he still didn't trust that, but because something about that space felt warm, like it breathed differently. It felt like God's presence was quietly waiting for him. One morning, the pastor's message hit a nerve. Jesus was rejected by men so you would know how accepted you are by God. The words hit like a bullseye. Liam leaned back in the pew and closed his eyes. It echoed deeper than he expected, because he knew the pain of rejection, not just now but long before. Images from his teenage years rushed back, like they'd been waiting for this moment. He remembered one in particular. The day he was cut from the school play. His classmates said he wasn't charismatic enough. They laughed, and it stuck. Back then he didn't know how to explain it, but something inside him changed. From then on, he lived trying to prove he was enough, for teachers, friends, family, everyone. But now, with that phrase echoing from the pulpit, he realized something. Maybe he'd been trying to be enough for the wrong eyes. Back at his apartment, he pulled out an old notebook from college. On the first blank page he wrote, "If God sees me, what does he see?" And for the first time in a long while, his writing turned into prayer. Each word was a question, a surrender, a step toward rebuilding. It wasn't a search for human recognition. It was a search for eternal meaning. The next Sunday, as he packed up to leave before the service ended, an older woman approached. One of those women who look into your eyes like they can see your soul. She said plainly, "You've got the eyes of someone who's cried a lot but didn't give up." Liam couldn't reply. He just smiled awkwardly and looked away. But inside, something cracked open. For the first time in ages, he felt seen. Truly seen. Over time, he slowly joined a church group that handed out meals to the homeless. He didn't talk much, just packed food, carried boxes, served with care. One cold night, as he handed a meal to a man sitting on the sidewalk, he heard something he'd never forget. "I thought no one cared, but just you being here is a miracle for me." That phrase hung in the air like God speaking again. That night, walking home, Liam looked up at the sky for the first time in a while. And what he felt wasn't just gratitude. It was understanding. He started seeing a purpose that didn't fit the world's logic. Maybe all those no's, all those closed doors, all the hands that ignored him. Maybe that was God saying, "That's not where you'll find yourself." Because the place where he hurt the most was the exact place God wanted to heal. The rejection the world gave him was the path that led him to the love that never fails. But there was still one last rejection left to heal. The one he gave himself. Months later, Liam made a decision that once seemed impossible: to visit his parents. There had been no big fights, no dramatic grudges. Just a quiet drift, fed by cold conversations, emotional disconnects, and a lack of genuine questions about how he was really doing. But now he wasn't going seeking approval. He went to confirm the peace that had begun growing inside him. The reception was polite. Lunch was filled with short phrases, long silences, and memories brought up like flipping through an old album. But Liam was different now. He no longer felt the hole in his chest. Their emotional distance no longer defined his worth. He looked at his father with respect, at his mother with tenderness, but no longer hoped for something they maybe never knew how to give. When he left, he hugged them both. Not because it felt like closure, but because he understood their pain was part of his too. And still, God hadn't given up on any of them. That night, Liam knelt in his room, tears not of despair, but of gratitude. It was at the bottom of the pit that I heard you, God. And if all of this led me to you, then thank you, even for the pain. That prayer wasn't rehearsed. It was a raw expression of someone who had learned that God's care doesn't mean no wounds, just His presence through every single one. Moved by this quiet transformation, he created an anonymous online channel. He shared reflections about rejection, faith, and identity. He didn't show his face or talk about himself directly. He just told stories that carried hope. Short, honest words born from someone who had walked in the dark. And there, in that hidden digital space, Liam saw purpose bloom. One comment in particular got to him. It was simple but full of life. I was about to give up until I read your words. Liam stared at the screen for minutes. The very thing the world rejected, God was using to reach other broken hearts. He understood deeply that nothing he had lived through was in vain. Every no, every silence, every tear was being redeemed in love. He returned to church, this time with a steadier step. He sat closer to the front, sang during worship, returned a smile with his own. He was finally letting himself be seen. After the service, one of the leaders came up. Have you ever thought about leading an emotional support group here at church? Think there's something in you that really speaks to people. Liam took a deep breath. He knew this wasn't just an invitation. It was a calling. Step forward. He said yes. But first, he needed to tell the whole truth, including revisiting the most painful moment of his life. The sky was gray that afternoon, like a soft-colored memory of what Liam had once lived. The park looked the same, with its damp wooden benches and the faint sound of traffic. But he wasn't the same man anymore. He walked slowly to the furthest bench, the same one where, years ago, he thought about ending it all. That day, he'd decided he couldn't take it anymore. The silence, the rejection, the emptiness. It was there, eyes full of tears and heart in pieces, that the phone rang. It was his grandma. He almost didn't pick up, but he did. And her simple words, "I felt like calling you right now," broke the invisible chain pulling him toward the end. Now he was back. He sat in the same spot, took a deep breath, and pulled a worn notebook from his coat. He opened it, picked up a pen and wrote, "God, thank you for not giving up on me when I had already given up on everything." It was more than a sentence. It was the summary of everything he had lived. From pain to healing. From loneliness to purpose. From human rejection to God's unconditional love. As he wrote, he noticed a young man approaching. Thin, slouched, with a lost look. Liam recognized that look. It was the same one he carried years ago. The kind that doesn't ask for help out loud, but screams inside. He waited for the right moment, then gently stood up and walked toward him. "Hey, mind if I sit here?" The young man nodded, saying nothing. The silence between them lasted a few minutes until Liam said, "I know what it feels like to not feel enough. Like everything in you is wrong and no one would ever choose you. But let me tell you something. The rejection that made you think it was over might be the beginning of what God is about to rebuild." The guy couldn't hold it in. He cried. Not loud, but the kind that comes when someone finally feels seen. Liam placed a hand on his shoulder and prayed. No fancy words, no big speeches. Just a simple prayer like the ones his grandfather used to say. Like the ones Liam had learned to pray when he realized God's silence was never absence. It was care in progress. In the end, the two stood up and started walking together slowly, one step at a time. Liam looked up at the sky and with a quiet smile whispered, "Now I get it. I was seen the whole time." If this story spoke to you, subscribe to our channel. We have more stories of hope that might remind you. Even when the world rejects you, God never stopped caring. And He's still writing your ending. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Sometimes a simple word can be the divine interruption that changes everything.